this Sunday service. A lot of community from the stage, from behind the stage, people showing up early to make this happen. This panel was community behind the scenes. The idea originally came from Steph. Leslie and Michael Ibarra helped shape the direction, and Amy and Tina, who I want to invite up now, were willing to participate. So a lot of community already happening in this. We're going to get our seats arranged up here, and I have a few words of introduction before we enter into our panel. Just wanted to recognize the community that is already happening as we take time to discuss belonging and community together. I think you're okay there. So Amy and Tina, let me make sure that microphone's on for you. And if you could think about an introduction, why don't you tell, for those who don't know, we see you a lot on Sunday morning. What are you typically doing Monday to Friday? Talk a little bit about your professional life, just a brief word of intro, what you do beyond Sunday mornings, and then a little bit about your season's family of life, or family of life season, the season your family is in, age of your kids. Why don't you share a little bit about that? I'll start with you, Amy, and then Tina.
So I'm at my third year as a middle school phys ed teacher for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It's really awesome and fun, and my children are also the same age, 6th grader twins, and my daughter is 4th grade.
So right now, I am in my second year of being what my official title is Early Learning Supervisor. So I work for Community Action Partnership of Lancaster in the Head Start program. So I have 5 classrooms around the county where I supervise the teachers and the staff there. So that is my Monday through Friday job. Sometimes I help in the classroom too. So if teachers are out, I'm subbing in their rooms and helping out with them. But that's what I do during the week. My family, so some of you know me, my kids are grown. So my oldest daughter is 29 and my son is 26, both of which have now moved out of the house. So it's just Randy and I. But it's very different. So yeah, no grandkids or anything yet, but I guess not officially. The guy my daughter's dating, he has a son, so we've kind of adopted him into our family right now. It's just nothing official yet, but yeah.
Well, thank you both. So you're educators. We're going to learn from you today.
We'll try.
Yeah. Before we ask Amy and Tina several hard questions. No, they won't be too hard. I have just wanted to anchor us in first the value that we're talking about in this panel is belonging to the community of faith, which says we value integrity in relationships and mutual accountability in an atmosphere of grace, love, and acceptance. Now, you're going to see these words appear in the questions that we ask, so that's why I wanted us to get ourselves around this value. So the questions we discuss here today, you'll see these words pop up. Already introduced Amy Beard and Tina Miller. Thanks again for joining us up here. And before we get to this question, I wanted to read a verse from Ephesians 4. So Ephesians 4, 1-6, a few verses say, I therefore, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body in one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in all. So the Apostle Paul here is calling folks to unity, and you hear the word one so many times, one Lord, one baptism. And the reason for that is actually in your Bible. In Romans 16, if you want to cross-reference that chapter. I'm not going to read Romans 16. Romans 16 is evidence in the Bible that the church has always been people, not just thoughts, not just theology, not just what Paul's laying out in Ephesians 4. The reason Paul's laying out all the things in Ephesians 4 is because of Romans 16. If you read that chapter on your own, you're going to see name after name after name, and you walk away from the chapter realizing, wow, the church has always been about lots of different people. And that is the work of the church, is people, inviting God's presence into people's lives. And so we think about all these different people in Romans 16, and then a place like Ephesians 4 says, hey, all these people, remember to be in unity. Remember to bear with one another in love. Remember humility and gentleness and patience. And stay focused on the hope of the calling to be one in Christ. And so let's jump from Romans 16 and all those names there to these two names, Tina, Amy. We can all list our names somewhat at the end of Romans 16, imagining ourselves as the continued people of God. And you both have been around church and church community for a while, yeah? Your whole lives? You can feel free to share a little more on that in the question, but when you share about how long have you been in church, could you also share a story of a time when belonging to a community of faith impacted you?
Okay, so I was raised in Georgia till I was about 10. So Southern Baptist my whole life, and that's just what you did. You went to church every Sunday, and you put on your fancy clothes, and it was long, several hours, and I had my coloring books. My mom was really good about that, but that's just been my life. You be around the community, and now as an adult, knowing better, thinking at a broader approach, it's your association. Like, who do you want to associate with when you're out there? And my way is the Bible. So finding the community that is serving the Bible, because there's lots of versions of what people believe that to be. And my greatest need, most recently that stuck out, when we moved, so Dave and I met in Maryland as teachers, and then we got married and I was pregnant with the twins. And there was nowhere for me to be a stay-at-home mom where we lived. It was too expensive. We needed to come to Lancaster. So we got our single-family home, and I was quickly put on bed rest pretty early, and then had the babies, and I knew nobody. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't meet anybody. And then I had it just was so much. So when I was able to get out the door, there were so many communities willing to host moms and kids and not judge you because you're like sleepily deprived, and I didn't know it was okay that kids could tackle each other. Like, this is what boys do. And so there was like this community of faith and a positive association, and people being like, hey, we're there, like, we get it. And there were other ways that I could see God working, because I did make friendships throughout my sleepless days, where this one beautiful soul would just come and be there for a couple hours so I could sleep. Like, it just was amazing how like the pieces had come together. But that community of faith was there for me, and I've made some really awesome friendships along the way through that. So that was really awesome to see.
Thanks. I think for me, again, I grew up in the church as well. My grandparents took me before my parents became Christians. So yeah, I was always around the church. I'm originally from Allentown, so that's where I started growing up. For me, being part of the community of the church, I think really made an impact when I actually did move down here to Lancaster. Even moving down here with my parents, we still moved around a lot. So thinking in the times from just when I was almost done with 6th grade until I graduated high school, I went to 3 different school districts here in Lancaster. So the one thing, though, that was a constant for me was the church that we went to when we came down here. And it was a fairly bigger church. So there were a lot of kids, like within the youth group and the program, that I was able to know. And fortunately for me, when I started moving from district to district, there was always at least one person that I knew because we went to church together. So that, I feel like that was like my big real connection, just feeling that impact of community, of always knowing that wherever I was within the districts that I went to here, even though I didn't really know anybody, and moving from school to school was really hard, those were my constants in my life at that time. And kind of like Amy said, of it kind of kept you on the right track too, because you knew who you could turn to and you could go to when you were struggling or having problems, or just needed someone to talk to. For me, it was just trying to always feel like I fit in somewhere, because feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere and moving from place to place was kind of hard. So they made that a little bit more easy for me at that point.
Yeah, thank you both. I hear belonging happening through needs that were met, as well as impact in a time that you needed it. Fitting in, finding a place where, did you say not judged, Amy? Was it nice to be in a place that didn't judge you for being a new parent? Am I hearing you correctly? Yeah. This next question might help us dig a little deeper into like what maybe is a little harder about community. And just so everyone can see it, let me try to pull it up here. If we can bring up the next slide. You've been in the church long enough, I imagine you've at least brushed up against some kind of disagreement with someone in the community or seen it happen. Do you have any examples of how to navigate in the midst of belonging and meeting of needs and all the hopeful things? What about conflicts? What about when trust kind of breaks down in relationships or in community? How did you navigate that, or how would you recommend communities to navigate those things? Tina, we can start with you since you have the mic and then go to Amy.
Okay. To be honest, I'm going to kind of go back with this question a little bit. I couldn't, this is going to sound bad, I didn't really think of anything like for me personally, except for the fact that before, that was probably what, I don't know, 20 years ago now, I guess, when Randy and I were youth leaders at the church we came to before here, some things were happening in the church, and I just remember the kids that were in our class. So we followed these kids from like when they were freshmen to seniors. So we were with them for 4 years, and just seeing them grow and mature. And one of the things as we were getting closer to the end, the church was kind of going through some things, which actually was about how they wanted the worship to run, and what that looked like on Sunday mornings and sounded like, and all of the things that go into a Sunday morning. And they just kept saying like how they didn't feel like they were heard, that they could have an opinion, that they could have a voice, that the church didn't really, value them. And it was very hurtful to them in that respect, because this is the church they grew up in. This is what they felt like was home. That was, for them, that was their community. And to not have that ability to voice their opinion or say how they felt or anything like that, it was a big conflict. I just remember we talked about it a lot. It came up a lot. The Sunday mornings where we were teaching, we met with them, I think almost every Sunday morning. Is that right? Yeah. So we were with them every Sunday morning. And for some of them, it was, hey, I'm here because my parents are making me come to this church on Sundays, but on other days I'm going elsewhere because I feel like I'm heard and I'm valued. So I think that was something, the biggest thing for me that kind of opened my eyes of, yeah, not everybody really does get along. Before I came to Lancaster and in these bigger churches, I came from a small church like this, so, and maybe as a younger kid, I didn't see the conflict as much. But yeah, that was just something that I remember, that we just kind of had to work through them or with them and try and get through that. But I don't know if we ever really succeeded in solving the conflict or coming to an agreement. But I think as opposed to, not valuing the young adults in here, you guys do, which that makes a huge difference, to be able to be in a place where you can say what you feel and give an opinion and feel valued. That's huge.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about relationships that, of the community of faith. So nothing with like the leadership of church, but just like other people coming and being a part of that community, and how we're also different and have our own opinions in our own lives and our own, to go on with. And it's like, why are we here? We're here to build ourselves up and to follow the word and do our best. And so like my opinion of a conflict and how it should be dealt with doesn't mean that you have to deal with it my way. Like I don't have to be the winner of this conflict. And I've just figured that out along the way with like teaching kids too, because they're so colorful and understanding their hormones and da-da-da. And so at some point when I value like a friendship or association or whatever, I think just communicating is really important. Maybe that person doesn't know what happened because they just didn't interpret it the way you thought they did or anything like that. And just communicating clearly so that the person understands, and then how they want to handle that maybe is the only way they know how. Maybe they don't know how to handle things perfectly the way that you would in your own family. And so that might lead to a more like gentle friendship or relationship, or that might mean to a deeper and a really more enriched relationship. And it's okay either way, because you know who you are and what our purpose is of meeting and being together. And it's just doing our best moving forward weekly as we get together. That's just how I've learned to come across those things. And some people might really get heated up in certain situations, and give them a minute, let it saturate and digest, and then come back around. It might be different the next time you have that interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just kind of going off of what Amy was saying, and definitely the communicating clearly, and everybody having a different type of style of communication and how they process and handle conflict. One of the things that we try and do where I work, because we deal with, all different types of parents and people from different backgrounds and things like that, is that we want to try to assume positive intent, or assume good intent. So sometimes when those conflicts happen and somebody gets a little heated and things like that, or just has a strong opinion about something, it doesn't always mean that they're like out, kind of like what Amy said, like out to win. It just is their personality and how they express their thoughts. But if we're assuming good intent, sometimes it helps, at least for me, to kind of bring me back down and just kind of give myself a minute to sort of process it and then be able to speak further on it. But if we're thinking that somebody is trying to say something that is to just voicing their opinion and being able to maybe help the situation, even though it's not coming across that way, I think sometimes is helpful too, if you just keep that in the back of your mind, that they are maybe just trying to be helpful, or they're not trying to be hurtful.
Yeah, thank you both. And we did not rehearse this, just so you know, so I don't know what they're going to say, but they're doing a great job, because they didn't get the questions very far in advance either. So, because we wanted it just to be genuine reaction and not kind of studied responses. So thank you for those being willing to share just from the heart. And the word that I'm hearing from you both is value. You both shared it in a different situation, whether it's relational community, leadership of the church not being heard, or just how we handle each other relationally in community on the same level. This word value coming up. And I'm hearing some things that, beyond the value of belonging in community, could help us navigate conflicts or breaches of trust. One is making sure folks feel heard. Like, that's a value, right? To find it important that people are heard. And a later question is going to talk about more practical, maybe, steps to do that. So we'll wait for that. But then, two, assuming good intent. I mean, that's a value that could be embraced in church community. So we're not here to declare those, per se, but we're just dialoguing with Tina and Amy. I think those are good values. I mean, I'd be fine declaring them, but we're not going to do that. Assuming good intent and making sure people are heard, feel heard. Two values that, beyond belonging, can help us navigate our different personalities and opinions and those kind of things. So thanks for sharing that. Next question, how do you define integrity within relationships? So start there. Remember, this was a part of the value, one of those words, integrity within relationships. How would you define that? And then a second part of the question, why is that crucial for fostering the trust and authenticity that helps with the kind of values we've been talking about? Trust, meaning people feel heard and welcome, not judged, to come back to some words you used. And authenticity, people being themselves. Amy, to your point of not judged, Well, that requires people being themselves, right? Being authentic. How do you define integrity in relationships, and why is it crucial for fostering trust and authenticity? Amy, you want to go first?
So we all mostly have cell phones. So I just imagine, what if you accidentally butt dialed a person while you were talking about them? And that would be pretty clear on your integrity, right? So just having that pure heart and that pure intent, and be authentic to that, because it's very transparent when you're talking and not being authentic. And I just think that when we try to show God's love, that's what He is emulating that. So if I'm hanging out with people that are not showing good, like they're just not being authentic all the time when other people aren't there, then how do you think they're going to be with you when you're not there? And I wouldn't want that of myself. Are we ever perfect? We're never perfect. We always try to be our best. But then making things right when you are together allows a truer vision of what you want to be and who you want to be and why we want to be that way for ourselves and for the people that we're with our families and whatnot. And then, when we're not perfect, calling yourself out and being like, I apologize. This is my best foot forward from here. So that's what I think of with that.
Yeah, so when I first read this question, the first thing that came to my mind about integrity in relationships is, ever since I was a kid, I don't remember if it was my grandmother. I think my grandmother used to say it, and my parents used to say it then too, was your actions speak louder than your words. So we can say any words that we want, but it's kind of what we do that is going to bring across, if we are a person of integrity, how we act, kind of like what Amy was saying, how we act when, nobody's looking or nobody is seeing us, and how we, just how we're acting. And that was just something that just kind of came to my mind. And I still think about that today. Don't tell me, show me. Don't tell me, show me. You can tell me anything you want, but it's your actions. Those are kind of what really comes from within. And it's kind of funny, Amy, that you were talking about, apologizing and things like that and being authentic and the trust. And so I'm going to tell you this story, and it's something that just happened to me actually on Friday. I'm calling myself out on it because I had to do it with the teachers that I was in the room. So I was actually in a classroom on Friday. It's a very hard classroom. We have a lot of challenging behaviors in it, and just one kiddo that was there, and it was the end of the day, and it was a really rough day. And I was thinking something in my head, and just when we found out, like, the mom was there to pick up, it just came out of my mouth. And my staff heard me, and they actually thought it was funny, and it sort of wasn't. But when all the kids were gone and they were there, like, I had to turn around and apologize and be like, guys, look, like, I shouldn't have said that, like, So I think in fostering that trust and that authenticity in relationships, like, for me, like, if I wouldn't have said that to them, I think that kind of breaks down that trust and that authenticity a little bit, because they're looking up to me as the leader. And when I'm doing something like that, that's not as professional as what I should be, or just kind of should have kept in my mouth. I feel like that's part of it too. Like, when we do make those mistakes, like, we need to be able to say that we did that, and apologize for that, and just be like, hey, look, I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. That was wrong of me. And I think that's a big part of having an authentic relationship too. Is don't show me, or don't tell me, show me, and then that falls right into there of our actions and what we think is important.
Yeah, thank you both for that. So fostering trust and authenticity means, I'm hearing the word apology. And Amy, I like your ideal of, if you have to set the phone down or check it to see if you accidentally dialed someone, then maybe stop that conversation. You're referring to gossip there? Yeah?
I mean, it could be anything that you don't want that person to hear. If you're not willing to say the things in front of their face, you shouldn't be saying it without them there. That's not God's love. Like, you want to speak positive, you want to speak life into things. I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect. In my head, that's what I would want me to be a better, and I would want my kids, like, I just would love to pour that over anything, to grow life all the time.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good calling for the church, is to evaluate when we're caring about the church and talking about it. In the church, again, Romans 16, it's the people. So when we talk about church, we're often talking about people. I think there is a fine, hard line there with gossip. I appreciate you calling us to evaluate that and consider that. And yeah, Tina, your example of, hey, this happened Friday, that is authentic. It helps us be like, when was the last time it happened to us? Yesterday, this morning. When do we need to turn around to the folks we impact and just say, sorry, I made a mistake. I was wrong. If that's hard for us to say, that could be a place where we can form in Christ, I would think. Do you want to say any more about gossip or apologizing before we move on?
My kids are very graceful towards me because I feel like I serve my best. My best foot's always at work with my students. And then at the end of the day, I come home and I have a decent amount, but it's just not enough. It's never enough at the end of the day, especially bedtime. And so they are very graceful in hearing me apologize. I could have done better, guys. Like, how can this be better next time? Like, what can you do to help be better too? And it's definitely getting better, but I think being authentic and showing I'm not perfect, I need help too, and let's do this better is what we are working on.
Thank you.
I was just trying to think, now that our kids are older, it's definitely a lot different in how we're interacting and the things that we say to them. I don't know if I have a whole lot to put into this. I think for me, being authentic with like the gossiping and things like that, I don't know, I'm pretty good at, I think, calling my kids out on stuff. I'm not afraid to say it, but there have been times when, they've come back and said, hey mom, like, especially my daughter. I think my daughter's a little more open to doing that than my son. And especially we had worked together a couple times and, sometimes she'd have to rein me back in. And I think that's a good quality to show too, like Amy was saying, like we're not perfect, and it's good for them to see that. And then as they're growing, I think the good part was that hopefully what we tried to instill in them was working when she could call me out on things. You know what I mean? And I think just being able to realize that hey, they are seeing and they are catching what we're trying to teach them is important as well.
Yeah, and I think that ties into this point. I'm just going to ask our congregation to hold this one, the great balancing act of accountability with grace and acceptance. This is a tough balance, but I think some of what you're sharing does help us walk away with holding this concept. How do we balance this in community? This is part of belonging, this idea of grace and acceptance with accountability. And the mutual accountability comes with things like working through conflict, hard conversations, apologizing when needed, fostering that trust. So I'd invite you all to hold that concept. We don't have time. This is going to have to turn into a podcast to unpack that one further. We'll let you know if that happens. But the last thing, I just want to end with, how does the rubber meet the road from here? What can a church do practically to help promote healthy belonging within community? Just give from just a heart reaction, one practical step a local church can take beyond the ones you've already given us as we wrap this up.
I think the first thing for me that comes to mind with this is just almost like if somebody showed up here at the church that was completely different from any of us, how would we react? Being on a lot of like mission trips that I went on and in different countries and things like that, like they always had this acceptance and this welcoming of just people off the street. Would we have that here? If somebody from just off the street walked in the door, how would you react? How would you feel? Would you make it a point to, go say hi to them? And that's even a question for myself. Would I even do that? That's not an easy thing for me. And yeah, I just think that, when we think about the people inside the church as well, like, do we know everybody here? And just building those relationships even with inside the church, I think helps build that community, because when things happen and we need each other, that just makes it all that easier, and to make everybody, feel like they're a part of something.
Yeah. And to add on to that, just having the open doors and the opportunities for people to come in, and us being welcoming and authentic when they get here. That's what got me in. We were church shopping for a long time when we got here, when I finally was able to leave my house with little babies. And it's so easy to find a home when people are happy to see you and the doors are open saying, come on, come join us.
Come join us, and what would we say, or how would we react to someone different from us? Those are good concepts to end on and good challenges. You've taught us a lot this morning. We could turn this into a part 2. And so I thank you for your hearts and your time. And can we just thank them for being vulnerable and being up here? Thank you. Yeah, you can sit down. Thank you for your time and your work on that. And I just want to close this time. We're going to sing one more song together. So I invite the worship team to come on back up. And we were in Ephesians 4. I just want to share these 2 verses as we close this time and move to our final song. Verses 11 to 13 of Ephesians 4. He himself, that's Christ, granted that some are apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers, meaning different. We're different giftings, different personalities. Verse 12, to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until all of us come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to maturity, to the measure of the full stature of Christ. In other words, we all are called by Christ to build up our community. And so we end with that, and I invite you to stand, and we're going to sing a final song together.
We are